Hey, I am Troy Bolin, storyteller, brand photographer, entrepreneur, and I love new beginnings, fresh starts, pivots, redirections, resolutions, revolutions, but I'm all about origin stories. And I can't wait to get into Christian's origin story. So, talk about the events that kind of led up to the big launch of your business, or maybe you want to tell us what you do. Maybe that'd be a great
Yeah,
place to start.
yes. I'll start a little bit with what I do. So I work with AI systems, AI infrastructures, basically for every aspect of the customer journey. And yeah, the big pivot that launched me into this was actually initially the birth of my first two children. So really, that was the launch pad. Pushed me to find a better way to earn income, to transition to the online space in the first stage. But my journey of getting into AI itself was actually a little unique, and so I'm excited to dive a little bit into that. But it all started just motivated based off of the need to provide a life that I wanted to have for my two daughters.
Oh, you know what? Isn't it crazy how parenthood kind of pushes you into that next level where you start like, okay, maybe I need to make some changes.
Yeah, it does. It really it puts you in a position to where you're not the only person in your world anymore.
Hmm.
We have friends, we have family, and they all kind of carry on their own lives, and we live alongside them, but we are not responsible for them. And as soon as that
Hmm.
dynamic changes for the first time, it just opens your eyes up to a whole new world. And I know you know that, having
It
kids
does.
yourself, it's wild.
It is wild. And I think the interesting thing is we can think about the future for ourselves, but when we start to think about the future that we're creating for someone else, it
Yeah.
takes on this whole new pivot. So I love that your inspiration is fatherhood, that your inspiration is becoming a parent. What was that like? That was like, okay, you held your baby, you looked at your baby, you were like, okay, this is the moment. Or was it when they hit toddlerhood? What was that? Where was the moment for you?
Yeah, so, both my daughters, when they were born, I just remember just having this overwhelming just awe for the creation that I was holding in my hands. And my first reaction to that was, I want to spend all of my time, as much time as possible with
Mm,
these two little babies, like I want to spend every chance I get with them. And I was able to create space and time around both of their births to spend time with them and their mother. But had to go back to work. And it
yeah.
was on the second go around, like going back to work, and I'm kind of just looking at the expenses that we've accrued and where we're at and how we're going to be recovering from kind of the setback, which was well worth of taking off time to spend with my
Mhm.
new babies. Um, how am I going to recover from this? And how am I going to actually create that ability to not only provide for them, but also spend time with them without giving all of my time to a job? And that was where that pivot really shifted. It was when I came out of the baby funk. New baby was born, out of the kind of those first few weeks. Maybe I think it took about 6 weeks on the second one.
Mhm.
So I get out of that time, and then it's like back to the normal grind. And I'm like, what I'm doing isn't going to be enough. I got to do
Mm.
something more. I got to do something different. I got to find a different opportunity, a different avenue, because this isn't going to work.
So
On
I'm
paper,
curious, what were
it's
you
broken.
doing? What were you doing when your kids were born? Were you
Yeah.
in
So
AI? Were you in tech already?
So I was doing at that time I was doing gig work and was in schooling process to get a nutritional therapy license. So I was essentially stepping into nutritional therapy, work
Okay,
one on
that's
one
not
with.
AI.
No, 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 no. It was my first swing of business, and that's kind of where that pivot started. Is I was really inspired just by the impact of nutrition on my own life. I have an autoimmune,
Mm,
and the lifestyle changes that I was able to take on after going through that program were life changing. No longer dealt with pain, no longer dealt with a lot of the same symptoms I was dealing with. I wanted to spread that out, so I saw the impact of that nutrition on my wife's pregnancy,
mhm.
and her delivery and her recovery after. And so I opened up a business to specifically help women with that journey of postpartum, prenatal, with them and their partners, helping them to establish those habits and diets for themselves and their children from that point. And that was a challenging swing because I didn't know how to market. I was taught
Yeah.
in-person marketing, not really taught the online side. And so it was a big hole in finding new clients, finding new business. And that was where the pivot started. So then the shift
Hmm.
focused into marketing. How can I learn how to market, first for myself? And then once I got into the online side, it was like courses, creation, content, all sorts of different things for putting out into online business. And that was where then once I saw AI kind of stepping in and taking over, I was like, oh my goodness, like if I'm not a part of this, in the shifting and the shaping of this technology, um, I won't have the ability to have a say in how it gets applied and how it impacts my life. So that was kind of that bridge into AI. But yeah, I started out, completely unrelated field initially. Obviously background in tech, background in computers, very familiar with using technology, but it started with, yeah, a dream and a passion.
I love that it didn't necessarily start out as, hey, I'm going to do AI. There was this need, a necessity, and then you went for it after that. And I also love that you said, if I know this is going to be a part of the future, you said something along the lines of, I want to be a part of what shapes it, what makes it. That's a really interesting perspective. I wonder if you could expound a little bit more on what you mean by that.
Totally. Yeah. So, we think about all of the revolutionary changes that have hit society over the centuries, from the
Hmm.
industrial revolution with machines just in general being applied to factory and production, farming, all of those different things, all the way down to where we're at today with computers and phones
Right.
and all of these amazing cool gadgets. Each of those stages have had yet significant impact, and the people that were involved in the initial creation of those technologies, but also the initial like implementation of those technologies, they were the ones who kind of shaped the way that the industry went.
Hmm.
And the analogy I always give is kind of a direct example is it's like, what if, imagine, we have the internet. Imagine if when the internet was first coming onto the scene, when it was first being developed, that Christians got on board and involved themselves directly with the development of those technologies. Where would the
Hmm.
internet be at today? What kind of structure would we be dealing with? We might have hopefully significantly less trash out on the internet. There
Yeah.
might be a lot less going on as far as kind of the unregulated activities with the internet because it would have been built with different principles underlying
Mm.
it. And so with AI, I see a similar opportunity with this technology that's really hitting the public at a massive scale for the first
Yeah.
time. And we have the opportunity to do with it what we choose. And if we choose to
Hmm.
back away from it, the people that choose to adopt it, they're going to be feeding, the way that AI works is fascinating, but the way that it feeds itself and learns from the experiences, they're quite literally shaping the way that that AI will be 6 months, a year down the line. And so if we have a specific group or even myself, if I choose to not participate in it, I'm opting out of participating also in the shaping and the development of that technology. And if I can accept that it's going to be here and it's going to impact the world, I would want to be a part of being involved with that if I want to create a future that I want my children to be experiencing with that as well. Because phones took the world by storm, technology. I like screens, TVs, video games, and I would argue a lot of people weren't prepared for that, and so a part of
Hmm.
that comes down to just not being willing to accept that that's the direction, that's the current. And it's not to say that we just kind of go with the flow or go with the
Right.
trends. It's more along the lines of, recognizing those things that are going to dramatically change the way our world functions and runs. And are we going to be a part of that or not? Or are we going to let other people take the wheel?
I think that's fascinating because I think as someone who's a Christian who has deep foundational a faith statement in Christ and building my life on God, it's interesting to think there's usually two different ways of thinking about things, right? It's like, okay, that's not godly, get out, right? Get out of there and leave the darkness alone. But there's also people like yourself that are like, wait a second, I'm going to come in with the light. I'm going to be the good. I'm going to bring light into the darkness. That's what we're supposed to do anyway. And it's interesting to see those two pivots. Now, I don't know if everyone's called to take on that role, but I think it's really cool how you want to be a part of the shaping of it,
Yeah.
especially for someone like me who's an artist, right? I know I hear AI, and I'm like, okay, like, don't take my job. Don't get rid of all the artists, the photographers, the writers, the creators. I don't want to see that go away. And so what would you tell someone like me who's like, please don't take my job? Where does that intersect, the AI technology and the art, the creative? I'm curious your
Yeah.
thoughts.
Well, so when I get into creative elements, the one most important thing that is good to understand about AI is that it's not actually creating; it's more reiterating. So it's reproducing combinations of things that it's seen before. So it's not necessarily creating anything new, although the combinations of what's in the image or the art that's being created may be new, and it might look utterly unique. But at the end of the day, it's actually just a recreation of what has already been created. So I think that there's always going to be a creative edge that human artists will always be able to maintain, no matter how good AI gets at creating images or even videos. However, with that said, I do think there is aspects that will be overtaken, like even just basic design elements or content creation, things that used to require a lot of manual production or a lot
Mhm,
of repurposing now can be done very, very easily, which then frees up more room for different types of projects, which I would argue potentially could be more creative. And that's really, in all the different areas of where AI can be deployed and potentially replace parts of human involvement. I think it really puts up a competitive push even to the performance of those humans, right? It's like,
mhm.
okay, so if a computer can now do this job, now it's calling us as the people to a higher standard, just like
Yeah.
when computers could automate data entry, and now no longer somebody used to have to be at the computer putting in those numbers. Now a computer can manually or automatically do that. Does that mean that this person is valueless? Not at all. It now means that they step up into the next stage, and so with that, I think that there's always going to be impact. Certain business models, certain focuses will be impacted more than others, and there's
Mhm.
unfortunate aspects of that, absolutely. But I think ultimately it pushes us higher. It pushes
Yeah.
us farther than where we were, and in a lot of ways, it's one of the most competitive things that we could have created. It's almost like a game in the sense. It's like we're here as humans, over the entire world. We've kind of taken this and established dominion, if you will, over the world and over its resources. And now for the first time we have, not our own species like a computer, is now able to rival some aspects of our capacity. So I think it gives us the opportunity to become better at those things and be able to use that as, like I said, that stepping stone up to an even higher level of performance overall.
Yeah, I like how you said that it pushes us on to greatness. And I think, just to segue a little bit into sports, I'm not a really big sports person, but I do know that Kobe Bryant, fantastic basketball player, and I know that it takes a team though to win,
Yeah.
right? It's not just all on Kobe. And I think it's interesting to think about AI as being a part of your team
Yeah.
instead of your opposition. How can you integrate this? And I know that there's ways that I have integrated it, but I think the way to stand out is integrating it and maintaining that creative edge that only you can bring to the game. And I love that you focused in on that it's not
Yeah.
replacing people, it's pushing them on to the next level of greatness. I don't know that I've ever heard AI explained in that way. So I really love that. And if you want to be at the top of AI, like, let's go there, because I'd love to have people with your frame of mind that we're not eliminating people. We want to push us on to the next level of greatness.
Yeah, and I think that the other part of that, is really, and this is especially prevalent in my work because of the place that these AIs are being used, but also keeping in mind the receiver, of that content, or of that message or that phone call, and how that person is going to experience that and feel. I was just having a conversation with somebody last night at a networking event about, right now, because of the craze of AI, there's so much of a push of, oh, it saves you money, it makes you more profitable, like more revenue, less time, less energy, all of these things that are correlated to making more money or being more successful or more financially independent. Um, and with that, if that's the motive, there's a lot of things that can be skipped, in the process,
Mhm.
just like with anything else. If my motive is money and I'm looking at, farmland. Like, I'm not going to treat the earth with the same level of respect as someone who's looking to get good food. So I think that's the other element of what I think is really important about the discussion around AI and its role in business and the world, is really like that end user, and that again comes back to that motivation of my family, my children, and creating a world that I want them to live in. Like what I do today, how I use these models today, the example that I set in business for these things now is going to be an impact. It has going to have an influence on the way that that goes, and also the way that I teach my children how these things work and how they interact. So yes, I'm all about shifting that narrative around it,
Yeah.
not meant to replace. And most importantly, it's about the end user. I know you've seen probably AI content on the internet. A lot of people who create AI content and put it out there on the social media, they create it
Hmm.
with themselves in mind.
Yeah.
They don't think about the person who's going to be reading or seeing that. And so when
Hmm.
you actually end up reading and seeing it, you're like, this doesn't even, like, this feels weird to read, or this doesn't
Yes.
even really make sense, or this isn't even telling me anything, because the person didn't create it with the end user in mind. They weren't putting themselves in that end user shoes. So I think, those elements that I just broke down there, that's going to be essential for using this technology successfully, but especially if you have more of a motive than just earning more revenue. If you actually
Hmm.
have, like, I want to take care of my customers. Well, these things can be used for that, but they have to be done carefully. You have to choose your approaches with that intention in mind. So yeah, I think it all comes down to motivation. Why is it being done? And more importantly, how can we make it as valuable as possible to the person that's receiving it? Because it's all about creating value, solving problems here. So
Exactly, exactly. I love the focus on creating value. That's what I feel like the internet's all about, is how can I add value? How can I give, And if we're looking to give, then eventually we will get. But just having that giving attitude and adding value, I think, is genius. I jokingly like to tell people that I feel like I'm in a prequel to the Terminator, because that has been my thought process of AI, of like, okay,
yeah,
rage against the machine, like we can't let them win. But I think as long as there's someone like you that's helping to shift that mindset to think about the end user, we don't want AI to rule the world. We just want it to help us get to that next level. Um, yeah, I think that's a great thing to keep in the forefront of our minds.
I agree. And it is like we've been inundated with that type of narrative, from Hollywood, from
Yeah.
the mainstream media productions. And it's something that is like it just kind of looms over the whole experience of AI at this point. Um, yeah, and at the end of the day, it's like it's all down to what we give it the capabilities to do. If we
Mm,
look at Terminator, right? They were looking at how they can deploy this AI into weapons, into
right.
warfare. And that's
Yes.
what gave Skynet all the permissions it needed to be able to fire off the nukes and
Hmm.
man the aircraft, like, and have those bots be able to be produced on a production line, so that it could take over the world from
Exactly.
destruction standpoint. So it all depends on what we're giving these tools. And that's something that even in the AI space, there's people that are far, far, far above even myself in this space, that their main focus is, okay, how do we produce this in the safest way possible? And that was even with the release of ChatGPT out into the public, that was really the heart and the intention, because that technology had been in place and had been being used by big tech and big companies
Yeah.
for years at that point. And the owner and creator of ChatGPT, of OpenAI, the founder, Sam, he basically was like, look, I want this to be publicly available because people need to understand, and we need to make this safe. We can't do safety testings on these small samples. We have to have
Yeah.
this safety be something that is public, widespread. So, but there's always going to be people who misuse it. Always going to be people who take advantage of it. Hopefully that isn't a group of people that's concentrated in power. That's the
Right.
hope and the goal. And so that comes down to kind of the whole thing with getting into positions of authority for the sake of influencing for the benefit of the people. Just like
Yeah.
the prayers of Solomon, or even the prayers of Daniel, where it was all centered on how can I serve your people in the way that you've promised they should be served. Basically, this is how do we do that? We get into those positions and we lead with that integrity.
Yes, and I think that's what the world needs right now, honestly, is people at the helm that have integrity, that have the human best interest at heart, and that want good. that aren't corrupted. I'm curious, what were those early days like for you? I'm sure you were working from home. And where did this fall in the timeline of the pandemic? Because I think a lot of interesting things happened during the pandemic.
Yeah, so my second was born at the end of 21. So I first stepped into online fully in 22 was the first year that I stepped in fully. And that was the first year that I took the swing at the nutritional therapy
Hmm.
client work, which was it was life changing for me and life changing for all the clients that I did work with. And so it was a wonderful journey, but not as profitable because it really came down to who I could reach in my immediate vicinity. So as soon as I
Yeah.
learned online digital marketing, like in some ways I wish I could go back to when I was solely focused on my own vision and dream for it, because now I know all the marketing tools that I needed to
Yeah.
have back then.
Well, you could always pivot. I mean, I'm doing five different things. It's fine.
Well, yeah, but it's all about how you spin those plates, and so I know the time
It's
will
true.
come. I have a big heart for fathers and bringing a lot of this work that I'm doing now back around to them, back around to
Yeah.
that, father demographic, giving them more ability to produce income and to be involved in the world and to have an
Mhm.
impact and leave a legacy. Um, but yeah, still building those foundations now so that I can extend that, sustainably. So, but 100%, these tools, like I shared already, they can be applied to almost any industry. So I'm
Mhm.
definitely going to be turning around one of these days and repivoting it again.
Right, exactly. That's what I feel like good entrepreneurs do. We see the pivot. I don't think we see into the future, but we can kind of dream, and see the different ways that things could go. Um, yeah. I'm curious if you were to tell someone who was like yourself, a new dad, if you could encourage them as an entrepreneur, what would you say?
Um, as an entrepreneur, is this someone just stepping out? So they're just starting the same,
Yeah.
like similar? Okay. So I would
Hmm.
say, um, don't get caught up in building the dream before, like, don't get so caught up in building the dream that you miss what you started it for.
Oof.
Like always remembering like those kids that you're doing it for, and that they don't see you when you're putting in the hours. They're
Yeah.
they're waiting for you to come home. And so being able
Hmm.
to create that balance, create the time, and keep that as the priority is probably the most important part, because it's easy to kind of switch those priorities in the sense of
Hmm.
I'm doing this for my kids, so they should be grateful. It's like, well, they just see that you're gone. They
Yeah.
don't really understand or make that correlation, and so you have to
Yeah.
be able to be there too.
And I think those early years, at least for me, my early years, I didn't have children. So I
Yeah.
could work like a lot of hours, way too many hours, because I didn't have children. But I felt that shift once my first child was born 8 years ago. Like, okay, I can't hit this, 80-hour a week thing. I can't keep living like this. I think
Yeah.
that's really, really insightful. Don't forget your why. Don't forget why you started.
So
What has been one of your defining moments as an entrepreneur?
defining moments. I think one of the first defining moments was really going out and going out with the service, so going out with the marketing system building type of things, and like landing clients, and like being able
Yeah.
to see that offer validation and be able to see the impact and the results I was able to get them, and just have that kind of evidence of the value that I was providing. So I think that
Yes.
every time it happens, it's wonderful. But at the beginning, that was just pretty essential to me continuing down the path, not just because of the finances that came of it, but even just of the confidence of like knowing like, okay, so this is something that is needed, this is something that is wanted, this is something that people are willing to pay me for, and it's something I can do really well. And so I think that was probably those key things, is those first few clients that I picked up when I first started. And then as it snowballed from there, kind of building from that. But that was a key moment. And then, getting into the online space in a bigger way was a big key pivotal moment. I did a lot of in-person networking at the beginning of my career with this. And as much as I love it, I still do it from time to time. It's just not the right demographic, or there's just something concentrated about the online reach that you
Yes.
can get and acquire versus what is just happens to be in your local town or local city. So that
Yeah,
was the
it's so
second thing
true.
for
I
sure.
know I definitely grew beyond the in-person. I still do in-person. I love it. I feed off of that like in-person energy, but
Yeah,
not everybody in that space or my local space is looking for what I do. So it just makes sense to diversify and to do
exactly.
online networking as well. So I think that is really, really wise. Since we were kind of talking a little bit about movies, I'm curious, what's your superpower?
My superpower or my
Yeah.
favorite superpower?
No, what's your superpower?
Superpower. Oh, so my superpower is taking like complex like ideas or vision or goals where it's very like abstract and kind of intangible, and
Yeah.
bringing it into a physical like reality structure. So like in the digital world, bringing it down into like an actual system build that does the things that we would envision or imagine it being able to do. So yeah, basically I can take ideas, can take vision and turn it into reality, essentially, is the superpower.
That is a
And that's,
superpower. That is definitely a superpower.
woven in with the creative spirit, the creator God, being able to provide that spark of life. But yeah, that's one of the specialties, and that's what I do mostly for my clients. Is I take their ideas, take their vision, and bring it down into a tangible system that actually does the things that we imagined it would do.
And what an incredible gift that is to the people that you're serving. Um, One quick question before we kind of wrap this up. How do you approach failure? I'm sure you haven't had like only successes. There's
Yeah,
always
so
bumps in the road.
failure, for me is always coming back to a lesson. I think
Mm,
that like our world is designed to work in a certain way, right? God is he's a intelligent creator, like computers work a specific way. If I'm trying to build something and for some reason it's failing, it's because I'm not doing something the way that should be done. And just because I don't know it, it doesn't make it a bad thing. It just means I don't know it. So it's like, okay, what do I need to learn, or what did I need to do differently, or what can I learn
mm,
from this to prevent this outcome from happening again? Failure is never comfortable for anyone involved. And the goal is to prevent as much damage from the failure, but failure in itself isn't the damaging part. It's more if there's something on the line or at risk of that failure. But it's always a learning experience. And I always come back to the fact that that's really the valuable part about what we're doing is the learning. The money is great. Obviously, it's necessary to keep going in this world, but really it's about learning the lessons. And those lessons, they're arguably more valuable than anything that you earn financially from what you did. Um, Obviously, depending on the lesson, some I think are a little bit more valuable than others, but
yeah.
I think it's the learning is that the whole process. And so failure is that process of learning, and we can call it failure, we can call it a learning experience.
Hmm. Well, I think in shifting it to a learning experience, you're able to keep going forward. I
Yeah,
think if we get that tunnel vision of failure, negative, then it's this downward spiral. But if
most
you
certainly.
shift your mindset into this is going to carry me into momentum because I'm going to learn from it. So wise.
I would, and that's, I feel like that's also comes back to knowing that each lesson is delivered, custom made from the Father to me. Like each one is designed exactly what I need to learn in that moment. Like it's never on accident. Like even when I make the mistake, like he knew it, planned it, was ready to spring it on me, so that I could learn the things that he needed me to learn, so that I could be the man that he wants me to be and become. Um, so what with that bringing into it turns into an experience that is a little bit more lighthearted, not as serious. I know he's
Yeah.
got me even in the failure. So even when
Hmm.
things hit the fan, it's like I know he's in control. I can rest in that, do my
Yeah.
best, and as long as I'm doing my best and staying focused on what is in front of me to do, um, I'm certain he'll carry me through to the end.
Yeah. And there's something about having that concrete faith. When we have that resting faith, then I can take risks. Someone recently asked me, like, are you a risk taker? I'm like, oh, yeah. Like, put it all out there, put it on the line, because I have that confidence in God, in Him just taking care of me no matter what.
Exactly.
So as we kind of end this, could you sum up what you do in 20 words or less?
Yeah, so let's give it a shot. So I build AI infrastructures for lead generation, sales, marketing, and customer support that are, yeah, completely customizable to each and every business they're integrated with. Might have gone a little over there, but
That was great. That was awesome.
tried to nail it.
Well, thanks for sharing your story with us, your origins, how it all began. I love that it started with the birth of your kiddos and that just transformed everything for you. Where can people get connected? What's a great place to find you at?
Yeah, so the easiest place would probably be, you find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. Name's down there at the bottom, it looks like. So just search my name. You should be able to find me by the face. It also will be all plastered with AI stuff, so you'll be able to see it standing out. So that'll probably be the easiest way. Send me a message, send me a DM, send me a friend request, connection, on LinkedIn, whatever you gotta send it through, and be happy to connect with anybody that wants to reach out.
Thanks so much. And thanks for listening in. Please subscribe, and we will see you next time for Origin Stories.